Robert Sungenis coming to you once again on the Robert Sungenis live program, this time for October 12th, Wednesday, in the year 2022, the year of our Lord. So glad you could be with us tonight. As you know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever. And I, as my role as host of this program, will endeavor to answer your question to the best of my ability using our Catholic faith, the scripture, the tradition, the fathers, the medievals, the popes, the councils, the catechisms, the saints, the doctors, the theologians, and just about anything I can find to help you walk away satisfied that your question has indeed been answered. We come to you every Wednesday from 8 to 10 p.m., except tonight, I and even my producer are under the weather, so I'm only going to go for an hour tonight. Sorry about that. But all things considered, this is the best we can do. We were going to have a live program tonight talking about the flat earth. And we were going to engage a flat earther, what's his name? Dubé, Eric Dubé. We were going to let him speak his mind, and then I was going to give my comments on various comments that he had. But since we are human and have our frailties and weaknesses, tonight is not the night. So next week, that would be February, what, the ninth? I'm sorry, February. See, I'm sick. The program will be on October the 19th. We will have a live sort of debate, and so that'll be very interesting, I'm sure. The flat earth is a big topic today. It goes up and down like a roller coaster. Sometimes it's popular, sometimes it's not. Depends on the mood of the country in a lot of ways and the mood of the people. But at any rate, it's out there and we need to address it, and we will do so. Also, we will have, as you know, we had Michael Jones here last week, which was a very good program. It lasted for 2 hours, and we're going to go longer, believe it or not, because we hardly got through half of his book, The Dangers of Beauty, and we will engage him again February the, why did I keep saying February? October. I think I'm anticipating winter coming. I'm thinking about it already. That's what we do up here in the Northeast. We have October and it's nice and warm and fuzzy, and then we know, winter's coming. But the winters haven't been too bad. I guess we can't complain. At any rate, he will be here October the 26th, 2 weeks from now, to finish our program on his book, The Dangers of Beauty. And we will go through the pictures and the images that we did, that we started last time, and finish them, hopefully, by the end of that 2-hour program. And hopefully John and I will be in better straits, getting over our little sicknesses and whatever, and we'll both be here to help you engage, and I think it'll be a great program. After that, I think we may go back to a previous subject we covered probably about 2 months ago, talking about aliens, extraterrestrials, and all that sort of stuff, because I did finish the book that was written by Dr. Paul Thigpen, and I wrote a review of it, and that will be published in Culture Wars next month, as a matter of fact, November. So I'll cover some of that in the program, and that would be going into November, the first Wednesday of November, whatever date that is. And we'll cover that then. But tonight for an hour, as I said, I can only give you an hour tonight, unfortunately. I wish I could give you 2 hours, but I'm just not up to it. I can barely make this program tonight for some reason. I have some email questions here that I probably should get to. Um, and some of them, for all you science buffs out there, we have some science questions tonight. So I hadn't even looked these over before so I'm even wondering if I should cover these or not, but I'll take a stab at them and deal with them. And then we have some theological questions, and then I'll get to your questions on the chat board here. And I see they're already piling up. So let me get to the questions here. All right. This is from John Smith, alias John Smith. I just watched the movie Everything and Nothing and thought it might be something you could talk about on your YouTube channel. It seems to me that mainstream physicists base their understanding of the universe putting theory on top of theory and then say, we have it all figured out. That's, you said it very succinctly there, John. Below, I recapped the movie and added a few comments and questions. Okay, movie Everything and Nothing, 2016. Michelson and Morley. A quote from the movie says, if the Earth was moving in ether, then there should be interference. Since they didn't detect interference, there is no ether, unquote. So that's a good one to start out with, John. And John puts his little comment in here in parentheses. Nice logic. Yes, interesting logic, huh? So let me read it again. If the Earth was moving in ether, then there should be interference. And what he's talking about is interference of the light waves. In the Michelson-Morley experiment, they shot two light beams in an interferometer, one going in one direction, which they presumed was the orbit of the Earth around the sun, which goes at 66,000 miles um, um, per second. I'm sorry, per hour, and about almost 20 seconds of 20 miles per second. In their theory, that when the Earth goes around the sun. So, if you shoot a light beam in that direction that you think the Earth is moving, and there's ether, something in there. You can call it ether, you can call it schmeether, whatever you want. There's something there because it can't be nothing. Okay, we discovered that as a metaphysical principle. Nothing doesn't exist, so you can't say there's nothing out there. Between the Earth and the Moon, there's something, and it's been given all kinds of names. Okay, but the fact is, metaphysically, we know something has to be there because it can't be nothing. At that time, they called it ether. Okay, and that's been an abiding name, actually. It hasn't gone out of style. So if the light beam's going through the ether, well, the ether's a substance, the light beam is a substance. The light beam isn't nothing either. The light beam is a substance. They're trying to figure out what kind of substance it is, but it is a substance. So if you have one substance going against another substance, something's got to give. Okay. And that means the light beam is going to slow down. When a light beam goes through water, what happens to it? It slows down. Slows down to about 2/3 of what it does in the air. Okay. If you take away the air, it could even go faster. Okay. But the prevailing science is okay. Well, we'll say this. We'll say it goes 186,000 miles in a pristine environment, no air, no water, just the vacuum of space. But here's the problem: they assume the vacuum of space from Einstein onward was nothing. But see, these aren't metaphysicians you're dealing with, these are scientists, and they don't realize that you can't say it's nothing because they don't realize that metaphysically you can't have nothing, okay? Because nothing doesn't exist. Now, if I keep repeating that phrase over and over again, nothing doesn't exist, just mind me, okay? Because it's hard for that sometimes to sink into people's minds. Nothing doesn't exist. So you can't say there's nothing out there. There is a something. Now we know it's not air. Air's not out there. There's some water out there, actually. Okay. There's some hydrogen out there. There might be some electron positron dipoles out there. There could be antimatter out there. All those kinds of substances. But there is a fundamental substance, the smallest particle that can exist and still be matter, metaphysically would have to be true, okay? Until you get to the point where you can't have matter anymore. And we think we know where that is. It's a 10 to the minus 35 meters in length. Is after that, you don't have matter. So you might have energy, but you don't have matter, okay? This is what we're dealing with. The light beam in the Michelson-Morley experiment is going in the supposed direction that the Earth is revolving around the sun. So there should be an interference in the interferometer of Michelson. But guess what? There wasn't any interference. Now, I have to put a footnote on that, however, because there was some interference. There was some interference. Every time they did the experiment over a 50-year period by about 12 different experimenters, and the experiment was the experiment in the history of science that was done more times than any other experiment. It was done more times by more experimenters than any other experiment. So, why was it the case? Well, because these guys were frustrated. They were frustrated because they were expecting a result that showed that the Earth goes around the sun. But every time they did it, it didn't show up. They had just a little interference, but not anything near what was required for an Earth going around the sun. And they could calculate these things. They knew the wavelength of the light that was used, the color of the light, how it was shot, where it was shot, when it was shot. They knew all the parameters, except they just couldn't get the results that they thought that they should get for an Earth revolving around the sun. And this frustrated them so much that another experimenter came along and said, well, maybe they didn't do it right. Let's try it again and tighten up our bolts and make sure our measurements are all right and try it again. And so they tried it again. And guess what? Same results. And so they tried it again and again and again. And like I said, over 50 years from 1881 to 1930, they tried it at least a dozen different times with a dozen different experimenters, and everybody came up with the same results. There was plus or minus one or two, but it's basically the same results. And as I said, they all found a little interference, just a little, enough to make them scratch their heads again and say, well, if the Earth isn't moving, then where's this little interference coming from? So, I mean, they were beleaguered with doubt about their whole physics. Some of them were just saying, we just don't have the right physics. We got to start all over again. Some of them were saying that. But of course, that would mean that they were wrong for the last, 500 years since the time of Copernicus and Galileo, Descartes, and all the other people who were saying that the Earth was going around the sun. And, you can't do that. Okay. I mean, come on, this is modern science. We can't start over again because that would just be admitting we've been wrong all this time, that our physics has been wrong. So they weren't about to start over again. And, so they went. So, the logic that was said here, let's just read that statement again. If the Earth was moving in ether, then there should be an interference in Michelson's experiment. Since they did not detect any interference, then there is no ether. So you see what they do. They believe as a fundamental principle that the Earth is going around the sun. That can't be bargained with. That's where they start. That's their epistemology, the foundational principle that they're going to base every interpretation they give to the experiments on. So the logical, well, let's just be fair to them. Let's say one of the more logical answers to this sentence would be this: if the Earth was moving in ether, then there should be interference. Since they did not detect any interference, then the Earth isn't moving. Doesn't that seem logical? Okay. But you can't do that because you already know that the Earth is moving. That's what your science tells you. Okay. That's the foundation. So that can't be a logical possibility for you. Now, some of them did admit that. Some scientists, there are some honest scientists out there. And they said, yeah, if you don't find any interference, that means the Earth isn't moving. Okay. But then the more dishonest scientists who don't want to even give that a possibility will just say, I'm sorry, I'm just not going there. And so there can't be any ether. That has to be the answer. And so this is what happened after that. Once you do away with the ether, and now you're saying there's nothing out there, and you can't define what nothing is, obviously. They call it a vacuum, but that's just another word for saying I don't know what it is. Okay. And how we would look at it, we say, yeah, it's a vacuum to us because we can't sense something that small. Okay. But there is something out there. So, but they weren't going to listen to that, of course. Einstein was the leader at that point in time in the early 1900s. He hated religion. He hated the Catholic Church. His wife, Maliva, and her three children became Catholic, and then he divorced her. Okay. So this was not the milieu for admitting that we've been wrong for 500 years. So Einstein said, okay, they didn't find any interference in Michelson's experimental apparatus, so there is no ether. Just do away with the ether. And that, my friends, is the basis for the special theory of relativity. Okay? It's where it came from. No other place did it come from. Oh, they'll try to convince you, oh, well, Einstein wanted to, take away the relativity of Maxwell's equations and all that. That's a bunch of malarkey. Okay? The first thing he did was he wanted to stop the Earth from being fixed because that's what Michelson showed. He wanted to keep it moving. And then he took that same principle and then he applied it to Maxwell's equations. And then he tried to make it look like Maxwell was first because, well, we can't look like we're biased and saying that the Earth is moving when the experiment showed us that it isn't moving. We can't go there. That can't be the basis of special relativity. It's got to be from, our analysis of Maxwell's equations. You see, electromagnetism and all that. That sounds sophisticated. You see, so we'll look intelligent that way. And then we'll say that we just stumbled upon Michelson's experiment after we had already analyzed Maxwell's equations and tried to relativize them. Well, we can relativize anything. And we'll relativize Michelson's experiment. We'll relativize a whole bunch of things. And Einstein's 1905 paper is filled with about a dozen things that he relativized. All of them. Using what they call the Lorentz transform. If you have trouble, well, we just put this little equation in there and that'll balance everything out for you. So that's been the case of science since what, 120 years ago. And it hasn't changed, and it won't change for a while until they finally get enough groundswell from scientists that finally figure out, hey, look, this ain't working. This ain't working. They already found out that it wasn't working when they invented the Big Bang Theory, okay? Because everybody was so high on, yeah, well, that's what we'll say. You know, there was a big bang, so that had a beginning. And that way we don't have to be stuck with the steady state theory that says everything is infinite, because that's absurd, okay? That matter is infinite. The nagging question is, come on, man, where did it come from? Okay. So you're just using infinity as a sort of a fudge factor because you can't give an answer, a logical answer to where it all came from. But so we can't go there. So yeah, let's have this theory called the Big Bang where we can say everything started at a certain point in time and then it expanded and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And over 13.87 billion years, it got so big that, wow, it created planets and galaxies all by itself, by the way. And here we are, biological human beings happen to be on this earth, all from development from this tiny explosion that occurred. Well, actually, it wasn't so tiny. This big explosion that occurred, 13 some odd billion years ago. And what problem did they run into? Well, they had already invented special relativity. And what did that do? Well, that limited the explosion rate to 186,000 miles per second. And it ain't going to work. Because why? It's too slow. You can't get to the universe we have unless you go for 100 billion years, perhaps. You'll get to the size universe that they think exists, 93 billion light years in diameter, if the speed of light's going to curtail your explosion. Okay? So what do? Here's what you do. You dream up another theory, just like John said here. That's what they do, theory after theory. And the next theory was called the inflation theory. And inflation means, yeah, it inflated like you would have never believed. It inflated so fast, way beyond the speed of light. Well, wait a minute. Didn't you just tell me it can only explode, that nothing can go faster than the speed of light? So how could it explode faster than light? Well, we're going to make an exception here, and we're going to call it the theory of inflation. And it exploded so fast that in the wink of an eye, less than a wink of an eye, actually, in 10 to the minus 26 seconds, it exploded to 10 to the 35 meters. Do you know how big that is? I mean, that's 1 meter with 35 zeros after it. Okay. So, yeah, that's how they get to their beloved Big Bang theory, because you got to get around Einstein somehow. Okay. And so there you have it. Special theory got in the way. Why? Because it's not true. That's why. When you have a false thing added to something you think is true, what's true times false? It equals false. Okay. So that, and then they ran into a problem when the Big Bang was big enough, 13.87 billion years later. Now they find out that it's expanding beyond the speed of light. And now we're really scratching our head. Okay. You had problems getting it going, so you went beyond the speed of light. Now you're having problems because it's expanding too fast. So again, you go beyond the speed of light. So aren't you breaking your own rules? Yeah, they're breaking their own rules. Okay. So, it's just a hodgepodge of one mistake after the other. And it all starts with the fact that God can't have a foot in the development of science. Okay. Once you make that grand mistake, then it is going to be hell for you trying to figure out how things fit together. And that's what they've run into. So much for that one. Okay, so then they said about Einstein, the special theory of relativity, really, no ether. Light doesn't need it, unquote. Okay, so it's more or less the same thing, but let's just delve into this for a second. So as I said, instead of answering Michelson Morley experiment by saying, well, if there's no interference, that means Earth isn't moving in the ether, you get rid of the ether, but then you have to explain how light can move. Because everything we know, any sound, um, radioactivity, uh, anything that has a wave nature to it, and they have admitted that light has a wave nature to it, has to wave in a medium. It doesn't wave by itself, just like ocean waves. What's waving? Okay. There's with waves, but the medium is the water. So that's how the waves are made. Okay. So something has to be there. But no, we come up with this theory. If we to get rid of the ether, we just have to say, hey, we don't need ether. Light can make its own wave. So they say. They've never proven that. Okay. But that's what they say. All right. So quantum mechanics. Let's see what's here. Quote from the movie Heisenberg uncertainty principle. We can't know what the speed of a particle is and at the same time its location. We should be able to know how much energy is in a certain location in a theoretical area of a box of nothing. Then, if you slow down time, you lost information about the precise energy. Then there is a chance that a particle could be created out of nothing, but they must go back to nothing in a very short time. Then, if it happens a billion times, one particle might be left over. And John says, what a load of illogical babble. Apparently, it loses its counterpart, violates what they just said above, but it still happens. Yeah, so this is what happens when you get down to the levels of nature where you're talking about very small entities, protons, neutrons, electrons, and now they have quarks and leptons, and those things supposedly make up the protons and neutrons. And then you got even smaller particles. So the smaller you realize nature is, the more difficult it is for you to go in there and find out what's going on. Why? Well, it's like trying to dissect an ant with a telephone pole. Okay. The light waves that we normally see something with are too big compared to the size of the particles, the atomic particles that we're trying to look at. Okay. So, and then when you go beyond atomic particles to quantum particles, it gets even smaller. We're down to 10 to the minus 37, 35 meters. So now it's like getting a telephone pole to analyze the human cell, okay, or even smaller. It just can't be done, okay. And the way they formalize this is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and that sets a limit on what you can see, what you can determine in the subatomic world. Okay, one of the things of the quantum theory is, and you'll find some folks jumping all over this, like Lawrence Krauss, for example. Um, they know that, speaking of what they know and not willing to, well, let's put it this way. Einstein says, okay, there's a vacuum of space that light travels through. Okay. And the reason he wants this is because he wants to keep the speed of light constant at 186,000 miles per second. And really, the only way you can do that is not put anything in light's way, no obstacles. So you just take whatever obstacles are that were there before in previous science, and you say they're not there anymore. And so light can travel at a constant speed. Okay. But then they realize in quantum mechanics, and Einstein didn't like quantum mechanics, that they realized that, no, look, we can't have nothing out there. Somebody got smart and said, come on, guys, we're more than scientists. We're human beings that have to know a lot of things, not just science, when we try to put together this universe. And they figured out we can't be saying that there's nothing out there. Okay. Vacuum, okay, maybe it'll fool some people, but they what they have found is even their vacuum has stuff in it. Not only does it have stuff in it, it is the most dense, concentrated stuff that we've ever seen or even theorized. Okay. They're called quantum particles. And you think the electron, proton, and neutron of the atom are difficult to understand, and are close together, so close together that you could have, um, let's say, in a drop of water, um, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms of H2O. Okay. And you think that's difficult to understand. Well, wait till you get to the quantum field. Okay. Where now you're down, as I said, to 10 to the minus 35 meters, whereas the electron is at 10 to the 15th meters. So the quantum particle is 20 orders of magnitude smaller than the electron. Okay, so and somebody asked me the other day, how would I illustrate that? And I said, if a drop of water were the size of the Earth, okay, the Earth is what, 8,000 miles in diameter. The electron would be the size of a basketball. Okay. If the electron was the size of the Earth, the quantum particle would be the size of a basketball, or even smaller, maybe the size of a golf ball would be better. Okay. That's how small we're talking. We can even imagine something like that. Okay. So no wonder we have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. But since they have said that space is now filled with quantum particles, so that it is a something and not a nothing, at least they've come that far. Okay. Now we have to deal with the dimensions of the quantum particles. They have, you can figure out the so-called time of a quantum particle would be, which would be 10 to the minus 44 seconds. That's pretty short. Okay. The mass would be 10 to the minus 5 grams. You know, it has electrical charge. It has density, which would be 10 to the 93 grams per cubic centimeter. So these quantum particles have their characteristics. Okay. And one way that they have tried to put all these characteristics together is by saying that the quantum particle jumps in and out of existence. Okay. Now, that sounds absurd because it is absurd. What they're saying, see, on the one hand, they've admitted that space is filled with something. On the other hand, they say that the quantum particle goes into nothing and comes out of nothing for 10 to the minus 44 seconds and then goes back into nothing. So they're still dealing with the nothing concept. Okay. So, um, so you'll hear Lawrence Krauss say something like, the universe was made out of nothing. Now, what's he trying to do there? Well, he's trying to mimic Genesis chapter 1. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to play God. And he's a scientist and he can declare whatever he wants. So he gets to play God for a while. And he has a book called The Universe from Nothing. Okay. Making it look like the material that makes up the universe came from nothing. Why? Well, because they believe these quantum particles go into nothing and then come out of nothing and are here for 10 to the minus 44 seconds and go out again and come back and go out. So you get this, what they call random activity occurring in space. And why do they do that? Well, here's why. One of these random occurrences is not going to go back into nothing. It's going to stay. And if it stays, then it has the chance to develop into a universe and starts the process all over again, you see. So those chances are pretty slim, but all we need is one. We need one of those quantum particles to stay and develop or evolve or whatever it is that happens to them and meet another quantum particle that decided to stay, and they join together, and now you've got two, and then you need three and four, and sooner or later, you get, you know, a googolplex of quantum particles that make a universe. So this is how they get around the steady state theory of infinity and start talking about things coming from nothing and so on and so on. So, all right. All right, let me, there's two other things here. They're going to get more complicated than what I just already talked about. So let me just put them by the wayside. Sorry, John. I think I did pretty good on your little questions there. All right, so here's another one. I'm getting some energy. Maybe I might stay tonight. I don't know. We'll see. We got a lot of questions on the board here I got to get to. So we'll see how long I can go. If I start throwing up in front of you, then you know something's wrong. All right. I have a Protestant who is on my back on the sola fide issue. I've pointed him to your responses, and yet he still makes the same claims. No. You mean my claims weren't that convincing to him? In a nutshell, he claims that, to put in his own words, quote, there is simply no way to reconcile the Catholic model of justification with Romans 4. The transaction of increasing in justification goes directly against Romans 4:4. Well, I don't know how he gets to that. I mean, I could see him having disagreements about Romans 4:4, but the increase in justification is not covered in Romans 4:4. Okay? That's the first thing you need to tell him. The increase of justification is explained elsewhere. Right now in Romans 4:4, we're trying to get the basis of justification. Okay? All right. He also doesn't believe the Catholic position can be justified in light of Galatians 4. I have suggested he gets your book on the topic since he would get more exhaustive response than he would in time-constrained debates and in Q&A formats. He stated that he's listened to your responses you've given on the Q&A programs as well as debates with James White and Michael Horton. Are you able to help with his objection? It seems to be constant itch for him. Well, I don't know what his objection is. If his objection is that Romans 4:4 doesn't talk about the increase of justification, I'll agree with him because it doesn't. Okay? It's giving the rudimentary theological foundation for justification. Works versus grace. That's all it's really concerned about. And I don't know what's so difficult to understand because our explanation is simple. When Paul talks about works in Romans 4, he's using the debt paradigm or the employer-employee paradigm, wherein the works that he has in view are works that you, as an employer, an employee, do for your employer. Let's say you work 40 hours for IBM and the boss pays you at the end of the week for your 40 hours. He gives you what, $100? And he probably gives you a lot more today, but he gives you your $100 and you go home. Do you have to know the employer? Do you have to be good friends with him? Do you have to have a personal relationship with him? Um, does he require anything else above you working 40 hours for his company and he gives you your check and you go home? Nothing else is required of you. Okay. Now, Paul says, look, if that's the kind of relationship you want with God, forget about it. It ain't going to happen. Why? Well, because God's not an employer. He's a personal God who has a personal interest in you as a person. Okay. So when you work for God, yeah, let's just use the same analogy. Let's say the employer at IBM, you work for 40 hours for him, he gives you your paycheck, and then, he says, by the way, John, I'd like to get to know you a little better. Um, we're having a moving party coming at my house this weekend, and all the guys are going to come over from the office, and we're going to go swimming and have some beers and have a great old time. We can even play what's that game? Um, Cornhole. One of my favorites, by the way. I'm good at cornhole because it's so simple. I mean, you just throw this beanbag and hits the hole. I mean, how much simpler can it be? At any rate, and I'd like you to meet my wife, my kids, my mom and dad are coming over. Get to meet them. And what do you say? You've been a good worker here, and I like you. I trust you. Blah blah blah. What are you going to say? Sure, boss. I'll be over there lickety split. No questions asked. We'll help you move your furniture, and then when we're done, we'll have a grand old time. We'll get to know you and your family, and just just have a great time together, and we'll get to know each other. Okay. Well, that's the kind of relationship God wants with you. Okay. It's outside of the employer-employee relationship. It's, "I want to know you personally." Okay? That's the kind of God we have. He's not just a being, he is a personal being, okay? This is where I think Thomas, didn't get the full picture. Everything was on being, being. Yeah, okay, I understand that, but he's more than a person. He's more than a being, he's a personal being. Okay. And this is the difference between Christianity and every other religion that's in the world. Do you know any personal gods that are out there in Buddhism, Islam? Islam, no, their God is Allah is way out there. No personal relationship at all with him. As a matter of fact, this is why the Muslims get so upset at us, calling God Father. Father? Well, that's a personal term. You bet it is. And we're his sons. How much more personal can you get than that? Okay. So, yeah, our religion is a lot different than any other religion out there because they don't have a personal God. Basically, he could care less about them. They just get absorbed into the oneness, and nobody is anybody. No distinctions, nothing. You're just part of the oneness. Okay. So that's where we're different. And so you can't make justification a legal enterprise. Because the minute you start adding legality to it, then you're going to get into the employer employee kind of paradigm. And that's a no no, says Paul. Okay. And this is exactly what the Jews were doing. They were saying, hey, I have these tokens. One of them is circumcision. The other is sacrifices, bloody sacrifices. Another might be fasting, right? Whatever. I've got these tokens that get me into the kingdom because my forefathers gave them to me. And they said, do this. And I do it. And this is my ticket to salvation, my ticket to heaven. These little tokens that I have. It's like me giving my paying for my tokens, and then I give the tokens to you. And oh, well, okay, go on through. You got the tokens. But they could care less about who God was, really. Okay. And this is why they disobeyed them, because they had no personal relationship with him. They could sin and not realize that they were hurting this personal God. And he is hurt when we sin against him, because that's what personal beings do. They get hurt, they get offended when somebody sins against them. Okay. So this is what Paul's trying to point out to the Jews. You guys are just like robots. You give your little tokens and you think that you've got a free ticket now. And then once you're in, hey, you can do anything you want. You can sin up the wazoo. Doesn't matter because I got my token. Okay. And Paul says, look, man, you are on the wrong track. You and all your ancestors have been on the wrong track. All of you. There's only a few of you that have seen the truth. That God is a personal God and gets personally offended at your sin. And now it's going to require something great to fix it. And you can't do it because he's that great. So that's why he chose his son to do it. Only the Son of God could do what was required to fix the offense. And then that'll give you a pathway, not a free ticket. He'll give you a pathway that you can walk. And if you continue to walk that pathway, you'll eventually reach heaven where God is. And God's going to be the judge of whether you have faithfully walked that path or not. And you know what he's going to base it on? How you treated him personally. Okay? So don't come to me with your works. The more you shove the works in God's face, the more he's going to ignore you. Okay? That's why it takes faith first. What is faith? Faith is a belief in a personal being. Okay? Faith says, I trust you because of what you are. You are a personal being who gives and has mercy and loves and cares for us. That's what personal beings do. And I recognize that about you, God. Okay? And I want to be just as personal with you. I want to give back to you what you've given to me. I'll sacrifice. I'll worship. I'll talk to you in prayer. All those things that personal beings do with one another. Like he said to Moses back in Exodus 33, he spoke to Moses face to face like a man speaks to a man. How much more personal can you get than that? Okay? I mean, think about it. This is the kind of God we have. And if you aren't going to get personal with him, he doesn't want anything to do with you. Okay? So I don't see what's so hard to understand about that. This is what the Catholic faith has understood about works from the beginning. Okay? Because it's a personal relationship. And it starts with faith. And then, as we have the faith to God, he's going to ask us, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Like he did with Abraham. Or like he asks of us if we see somebody who's naked and needs food. Can you help him? Well, let's see how personal you are. Do you realize this is a human being in front of you? Okay. Now, if you were a robot, You would look at it and say, yeah, human being, no clothes, needs food, and then walk on your way. But you're a human being made in the image of God. So you know that what you're looking at is someone in destitution who needs help, and he's only going to get it from you, another personal being. This is how personal beings relate to one another. So God says, can you do that? Can you show me how personal you want to be? Now, you've said you want to get personal with me. Okay, I'll accept that. And you pray to me and you think about me and you worship me and all that. But here, let's put you to the real test. Can you take one of these people made in my image who's not doing so well, and can you help him out of your own goods and do it willingly, mercifully, not begrudgingly? Can you do that? If you can, then you're showing me that you are personal just like I am. And that's the kind of people I want in my kingdom. Okay? So, very easy how works fit into it and how we increase in our justification by doing those works, because every time God sees us do those things to another personal human being, he says, wow, they're really learning. They're really walking the path. Okay? That's how you're increasing in justification. Okay? So that's another very simple concept. I don't know how much simpler it can be. So, all right, let's go on to our chat board here and see what we got. If I was going for an hour tonight, we'd have 5 minutes left. Let's see how long I can go. I have the queasies in my stomach. I had about an hour before I came on. So let's see what happens. All right, question. Can you describe the motion of the moon in the geocentric system? If the Earth is not rotating, does that mean the moon actually orbits Earth once per day? That is correct. Okay, so let's make it very simple. You have a rotating universe around a fixed Earth. That universe is going to carry every celestial object with it as it rotates. So it's going to carry the stars, it's going to carry the sun, and it's going to carry the moon. Okay. So yes, and that happens what? Once a day. We see the moon go over once, and then the next day we see it again, right? So yeah, so it's traveling once a day. The whole universe is rotating once per day around the fixed Earth. Now, the sun has a little independent movement. It has a retrograde movement of about 1 degree per day. So it is going to travel with the stars, but as it travels with the stars, it's going to go back just a little bit every day. Okay. And it's going to travel through the zodiac, and that's how we get our year. It takes 365 days for the Earth in that little retrograde movement per day to go back 360 degrees to get to the beginning point. Okay, so that has an independent movement, and the moon has an independent movement. Okay, it's going to complete its own revolution around the Earth. In addition to the revolution it has every day, it's also going to move wherein it completes its orbit around the Earth in 28 days, approximately 28 days. It varies from month to month. Okay, so it has an independent movement, but that independent movement is still um, subsumed into the major movement of the universe around the Earth every day. Okay, so I hope that's understandable. Question: is Malachi Martin trustworthy? Why or why not? Um, there are various opinions about Malachi Martin. I would say this, Una: you don't need to pay attention to anything Malachi Martin says. Okay, it's only going to get you confused. Why? Because we don't know whether he was telling the truth or not. So it's best just to leave it alone. Don't get involved with that kind of stuff. Okay. I'm sure a lot that he had to say was true when he wrote his books. I forget the title of them now. I haven't read them in a while, but I'm sure that what he said about the hierarchy when he camouflaged their figures and under different names is true, and it's still going on today. The church is a big political machine today. Okay, and I'm sure it's even worse than what Malachi Martin had written under characters that were unidentified in his book. But still, you really don't need to go here or there with Malachi Martin. That's not the wheel or woe of your Catholic faith. Okay. So, like I tell people, don't get mixed up with, apparitions here, there, and everywhere. Same with Malachi Martin and people like him. Don't get mixed up with them. Okay. Look, if they aren't true, they've been lying to us, they are going to receive a horrendous judgment from God. And I feel sorry for them. Okay. Um, just don't go there. Okay. That's my advice to you. All right. Um, Dr. Sungenis, how could a demon, Asmodeus, fall in love with Sarah in Tobit? If God, who is a spirit, loves, then could demons who are spirits love? Um, Let me take a look at that. Um, that would be Tobit 6:14. All right. Tobiah objected, however, Brother Azariah, I have heard that this woman has already married 7 times and that her husbands died in their bridal chambers. On the very night they approached her, they dropped dead, and I have heard it said that it was a demon who killed them. Okay, so here you go. He says, I heard it was said that it was a demon. He doesn't know that. Okay, so you're trying to make a speculation into a fact, and we don't know that it's a fact. Okay, so I would say no. All right. Um, is it possible to calculate solar and lunar eclipses in the geocentric model? If so, then how? Yes, Jay, because we basically use the same system that the heliocentrists use. Okay, all we do is change the centers. Now, I know that might be hard for you to understand by just me saying it. Okay, but if I could illustrate it for you on paper, you would see, oh, you go, oh, okay, and that happens every time I show it to people. Okay, um, the Tychonic model that puts the Earth in the center and the sun at 93 million miles away is not like the Ptolemaic model. Okay. The Ptolemaic model had the Earth in the center and then Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Okay. The Tychonic model, which is the geocentric model we use, okay, has the Earth in the center, and then there's the sun, and then around the sun goes Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Okay. So it's a completely different model than the Ptolemaic model. And it works. Okay. Because we know it works because we can see the phases of Venus from Earth, which was not true in the Ptolemaic model. Okay. And we can also calculate stellar parallax and stellar aberration from the Tychonic model. And we can do that one of two ways. In the pure Tychonic model, we can have the stars rotate around the sun once per year. And so we're going to have the difference in parallax angle there. Or in what we call the neo-Tychonic model, which has the Earth as the center of mass and the sun as the geometric center. And as the geometric center, the sun is going to be the pivot point for all the stars that rotate around the Earth. We can use that model. It's called a neotychonic model. And that's probably the better model because Scripture doesn't say that the Earth is in the center. Scripture says the Earth doesn't move. And there's a big difference. Sometimes there's not a difference. The center can be the center of mass and not move. But other times, in various applications, and we use this in machinery all the time, um, we have, did you ever, when you get your tires on your car, what's the first thing you have to do to your tires? You got to get them balanced, right? Because what's going to happen if you don't get them balanced? Well, it's going to go wobbling down the street and you're going to get a big vibration in your car. Why is that? Well, that's because the center of mass is different than the geometric center in your tire. Okay. And what they have to do is they have to put weights on the wheel so that they have the geometric center equate with the center of mass of your wheel, and then everything's going to run smoothly. Okay. So that that difference exists. So since the scripture doesn't say that the earth is the center, it says it doesn't move, that best fits into physics with the neotychonic model, which says that the earth is the center of mass, because the center of mass by definition doesn't move. Okay. The geometric center can move, and it's going to move around the center of mass. Okay. So that's another explanation we have for stellar parallax and stellar aberration. And so that works. Okay. All right. Please explain how the Coriolis effect works. Okay. So in a geocentric model, you have the universe rotating around the Earth once per day. So the Earth is the center of mass for the rotating universe. Now, what's going to happen when you have a rotating sphere like the universe? Well, the rotating sphere of the universe has angular momentum. That's what we call it in physics, angular momentum. And angular momentum is going to be transferred into three inertial forces. The first is the centrifugal force, the second is the Coriolis force, and the third is the Euler force. Three forces that come from just the fact that the universe is rotating. Okay? Now, you can go on Wikipedia and find this out. Okay? So if that's the case, what is the centrifugal force? The centrifugal force is an outward force going away from the center. And the Coriolis force is an inward force, except it has another dimension to it. It's a curved force. It's like a screw type force. It goes zoo, 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 zoo. Okay? That's the Coriolis force, and it's very powerful. Okay? It's twice the magnitude of the centrifugal force. So whereas the centrifugal force in a rotating universe would make the stars go out to the rim of the universe, the Coriolis force holds them together so that they can't go out. And since it's twice as strong as the centrifugal force, they're going to stay right where they are. Okay. And it has a grip on them. They can't move out of that force. Okay. We know how strong the Coriolis force can be. We've seen that in our life. The centrifugal force is twice that. So we have a great force by the rotating universe to keep those celestial objects in their place. That's why we never see them move. Okay. Even though we see the universe rotating. Well, why aren't these stars going out to the rim? Okay. Well, here's the reason. And we can prove this by physical dynamics. That's how it works. And it keeps them in. And now, we in the center, let's say, the proximate center of the universe, the absolute center of mass, which would be at the core of the Earth, okay, is not going to feel any inertial forces. Okay, that's the definition of a center of mass. The core of the object is not going to feel any inertial forces or gravitational forces. Okay, that just makes sense. As soon as you go outside of that center. Let's say you go, 1,000 miles outside of the center of the Earth. Well, that 1,000-mile distance is going to feel some inertial forces. Okay. And if you go 4,000 miles out, it's going to feel even a little bit more of those inertial forces. And that's why we feel Coriolis forces on the surface of the Earth. That's why hurricanes will rotate counterclockwise in the north and clockwise in the south. What's moving them? It's the Coriolis force that's moving them. That's why the Foucault pendulum will begin to turn within a 24-hour period until it's back where it started. What's moving it? It's the Coriolis force from where? From the rotating universe. Okay, that's where it comes from. And all this is spelled out in the relativity theory. They'll explain it to you probably even better than I can. So it's not something that we're just making up. We get it from them. We get it from the best of modern physics today. Okay, so that's what it is. All right. Okay, so I'm going past 9 o'clock, so I guess I'll have to stay here. Question two. Dr. Jess, what are the Hughes-Drever experiments? According to Wikipedia, they are the most accurate confirmations of special relativity and the most precise measurements of the Lorentz invariance ever conducted. Yeah. Will, you should be able to tell just by how you ask the question why they think it's accurate. Why? Because they use the Lorentz transform. Okay. So when they plug in the Lorentz transform, everything goes to zero. And they go, voila, the special theory of relativity works. Okay. That's what they do. They do it in every single experiment ever conducted. Why do they do that? Because they know that the Earth revolves around the sun. So if Michelson didn't have any interference in his light waves, and yet we know the Earth goes around the sun, then what must be the answer? The Lorentz transform. I can insert an equation into the mix to make everything balance so that I can still say the Earth revolves around the sun. This is where it all goes back to. And it's insidious because they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again for the last 100 or so years. And the closer they can get it to zero using the Lorentz transform equation, they think the more accurate special relativity is. Okay, but they haven't dealt with a fundamental problem, which is where did you get the Lorentz transform in the first place? You got it because you assumed the Earth was going around the sun. You got rid of the ether. You made the speed of light constant as your buttresses toward this theory. And you never gave the possibility that the experiment showed that the Earth wasn't moving. And if the Earth isn't moving, you don't need a Lorentz transform. Okay. So they've mesmerized themselves. They brainwashed themselves. All right. I mean, I wish I could infuse this knowledge into you somehow. Because I keep having to explain it to people, and they'll come up with something like this, but they haven't dealt with the fundamental problem. See, that's the issue. And until they do that, which they aren't going to do, then we're back to square one. All right. How many moves have you created thus far? The principal and closet geocentrist. Yeah, I guess if two, we're making a third one right now. I did start another one called The Church versus Galileo. I never got that completed because too many other things got in the way. I did make one called The Anti-Copernican Decrees of the Catholic Church. That's on YouTube. Um, what else did I do? Yeah, that's it. So we are making another one called "How the World Was Made in 6 Days," and that's going to be a really fantastic one. I'm looking forward to that. It's taken a long time because we're putting good work into it. We're going to explain the 6 days from a scientific vantage point, show you each day how scientifically that can be shown to be feasible and taken literally because the science backs it up. Believe it or not, okay? And it's going to be all very well graphically illustrated, and uh, we're going to cover every topic we can think of that people would be concerned about. We're going to get the best of the scientific world. We're going to get the best of the patristic world, the best of the Catholic Church's dogmas, the best of the ideas of the fathers and the medievals, the best of modern science today, and we're going to put it all together, shake it up, and our shake and bake is going to come out of the oven, and it's going to be fantastic. So we're going to be releasing one day at a time for the whole 7 days of creation. And the first one, I do believe, will be released before the year is out this year. So we're working hard on it, and that'll be the fifth or sixth movie we've made. So, okay. Question: Can you explain how your parallax is a lot of science questions today? Can you explain how your parallax is equivalent in the two systems? Isn't parallax caused by horizontal movement in the HC system, whereas it could be caused by vertical movement in the GC? Well, I'm glad you asked because see in the geocentric system, we basically have two parallaxes, one horizontal and one vertical. Okay, why is that? Well, because when the universe makes its rotation around the Earth, it's not just staying in one place, so to speak, and rotating. It's moving up and down over a year's period, okay, and it's moving side to side in a year's period. So that translates into a spiral movement, okay? So in that spiral movement, you're going to get two parallaxes. You're going to, over the year, you're going to get a horizontal and a vertical. And that means that, as far as I can tell, this is how we could possibly prove geocentrism over heliocentrism because we should be able to see a vertical parallax off of the universal equator. In other words, we should be able to see the stars go up and down the the universal equator by about half of what they would move in the horizontal parallax that we would see anything off of the universal equator. So let's say we're at 45 degrees. We're looking at 45 degrees. Well, we're going to get a little bit of vertical, and we're going to get a little bit of horizontal parallax. Okay. Now, but the most acute vertical parallax is going to be on the universal equator, and it should be easy for us to detect it. Okay, because now we have the Hipparchus satellite, we have um, the um, the Hubble telescope, okay, that can see out to 1,000 light years, according to them. Okay, before it was only 300 light years. Now it's 1,000, so they claim. And if that's the case, then we should be able to detect vertical parallax on the universal equator of certain stars. Okay, um, that would be another evidence of geocentrism. Now, I say that in the light of the heliocentric version, which to this day I cannot see how they are going to provide us a vertical parallax. Horizontal parallax is very easy for them. because in their model, the Earth is going from one side of its orbit to the other side of its orbit, and that's all horizontal. Okay. The Earth has no up and down movement. So there's no vertical angle that's created. The Earth is supposedly on the ecliptic plane, and the ecliptic plane stays at 23.5 degrees. Okay. And the Earth is not going up and down the ecliptic plane. Okay. It's staying on the ecliptic plane. As a matter of fact, it makes the ecliptic plane with the sun. Okay. So obviously, the Earth isn't going to move up or down of that ecliptic plane. The planets may be, Mars may be, it's about 5% off the ecliptic plane. Pluto definitely, it goes up and down the ecliptic plane, but not Earth. So Earth has no vertical movement on the ecliptic plane. So how are you going to pick up vertical parallax? Okay. So this is one thing that I have posed as a possible proof for the geocentric system is a vertical parallax. And they, as I said, they have the power now to go out and look at it. Are they? I doubt it. Okay. Because here's another reason why they wouldn't do it. Because they know it's not true. They know geocentrism just can't be true. Because Copernicus told us it wasn't true. Well, Copernicus, big scientist, man. The whole kit and caboodle was based on what Copernicus said. And this guy was a lech, if you look at his life. So, how is it that all of science is based on this guy who really didn't know what he was doing, Copernicus? If you look at his science and his life. Okay. But we know the Earth must be going around the sun. Okay. And we're not going to go back 500 years and take the clock back. We're just not going to do it. Okay. We'll see. That's all I got to say. We'll see. All right. Who did the artwork on the flat Earth? It looks nice. Yours truly. I'm becoming quite adept at that cover making because I've done a lot of books. So I said, let me try to make my own covers because it's too expensive to have somebody else make them. And that one I hit the jackpot on, I think, the flat Earth one. Some of the other ones are kind of plain and, you know, not all that impressive, but you know, I've got my style. But that one, yeah, I just had some great ideas, just flung into my head somehow, and I put them on paper, and yeah, so that's a picture of Leonardo da Vinci's. What's the name of the painting? Something Mundi. I forget the name of the painting. Anyway, so I have an enlargement of the painting as the major background, and then I have a smaller version of the painting that fits into the larger painting. And so you've basically got two exposures together. So that's what that looks like. And then the back, I forget how I designed the back. I just got the rest of the clothing because the colors he uses are just spectacular, Da Vinci. And I just plastered them on the back cover and made it like one whole cover. Yeah, so I was quite proud of that. So thank you for noticing. All right. Uh-oh. Will says this is a complicated question. So I understand if you need time to research it. Did Pope Francis officially claim that the Argentine bishops have the correct interpretation of Amoris Laetitia? Does the Argentina bishops' interpretation clear up the ambiguity of Amoris Laetitia, especially in chapter 8? I found Pope Francis's letter to the Argentine bishops that was posted on the AAS. The following paragraphs are highlighted sections. Okay, Will, so I did hear about that, but I didn't bother to go investigate it because who cares about the Argentina bishops? You know, it's like, what we really want is Pope Francis to give us an official interpretation, not the Argentine bishops. Because then if they're wrong, he's going to blame it on them. If they're right, okay, so they get some points, but it's not an official statement from the church. Okay. So that's why I didn't bother to get into it, because it's neither here nor there. All right, let me read the rest of your thing here. Argentine bishops say in number 6, in other more complex circumstances, and where a declaration of nullity could not be obtained, the above option may not in fact be feasible. However, a path of discernment is equally possible. If it is recognized that in a specific case there are limitations that mitigate responsibility and culpability, compare the following paragraphs 301, 302, particularly when a person considers that he or she would fall into a further fault, harming the children of the new union, Amoris Laetitia opens the possibility of access to the sacraments of reconciliation and the Eucharist. Compare the following notes 336 and 351. These in turn dispose the person to continue maturing and growing with the force of grace. Pope Francis then said, the writing is very good and fully explains the meaning of chapter 8 of Amoris Laetitia. There are no other interpretations, and I'm sure it will do a lot of good. May the Lord repay you for this effort of pastoral charity. Okay, so as you can see, they were very careful. I'm talking about the Argentine bishops. They were very careful to limit the access to what was before perceived as a wide open invitation for all adulterers to come into the church and receive communion. Okay. When Amoris Laetitia first came out, the critics were saying, oh my God, what did he do? It's just, we know the cause of this. The German churches are emptied, and so they want to fill them up again. And so half of Germany is filled with divorced and remarried Catholics. So, and we want their money. So, we'll twist the truth a little bit and let them come in, and then we'll give some excuse later on. That's what everybody was saying. All right. So apparently, Pope Francis is open to a much narrower interpretation of what he wrote. And it all comes down to the interpretation. Okay. Because words can mean a lot of things. And if we don't define them properly, and if we don't have the right context, we can get all screwed up in a jiffy. And apparently, one direction that's going to minimize the damage that Amoris Laetitia would precipitate is by narrowing the field. And it looks like from this definition that they narrowed it pretty significantly. Okay, it's not to say that this is the end, that there might not be more narrowing, but at least this is a start. So it takes away all the, let's so-called danger zones of open invitation to now very specialized cases that have to follow A, B, C, D, and E before they're even considered to be allowed to come back into the church after being divorced and remarried. That's a good sign. Okay. I can't say that it's perfect, but it's a good sign that's moving in the right direction. Because Amoris Laetitia is out there. You can't take it back. It's like once you squeeze the tube and the toothpaste comes out, you can't put it back. Okay. So now you're going to have to do a lot. If what you said when the toothpaste came out could be interpreted in a very open-ended way and do damage to the church, well, now you're going to have to do what you can to show that, okay, that's not the direction we want to go, or maybe that's the direction we didn't even intend to go. We just saw a hurt out there. We wanted to fix it, and we figured this would be one way to fix it. It was misinterpreted, so now we need to interpret it correctly, and let's get to where we need to go with this. okay? So that we satisfy all parties, but especially the truth that has been given to us in our tradition, in Scripture. And so what we have here is a working hypothesis. Not no, that's the wrong word. A working effort to get this thing right. Okay, which is good. I see nothing but good in this because it's heading in the right direction. Okay, so that's my opinion. Okay, and when you come to this program, what do you get? My opinion. All right. So, can true prophets make false prophecies? Was Jonah's prophecy of Nineveh being destroyed in 40 days merely conditional? Well, of course it's conditional, okay, because he said if, the big word if, right? If you don't repent, God will destroy you in 40 days. Okay, so that's conditional. Now, the question you ask, however, is not going to fit into that scenario, okay, because Jonah was just reiterating what God told him. You tell the king of Nineveh if he doesn't repent, he and his people in 40 days, he's going to be destroyed. Okay, so it's coming from God. It's not something Jonah made up by himself. And the fact is, God can make a conditional threat. He does it all the time in the Old Testament. Okay. And, some Thomas will come along and say, well, then it's not really conditional because God already planned out what was going to happen. Well, you can kiss that goodbye. Okay. Because scripture tells us the truth, and God tells us the truth that he gave a conditional promise, and that promise was true. If that king didn't repent, he would have been destroyed. Okay. And so it all depends on the free will of that king, whether he's going to do it or not do it. And God's going to go one or two ways depending on what that king decides. Okay. And that free will is not something manufactured. It's not something that's already declared in the recesses of God's eternal mind that this king's going to do this, and therefore, I already know what I'm going to do. So the question would be, well, why did you threaten him in the first place? Okay. See, there's always these logical questions that surface when you think you can outsmart God with metaphysics and say this is what God has to do, and all that kind of stuff. Scripture and God are much bigger than metaphysics. Okay. So don't get bedaggled by them. Just read the scripture for what it says, and it's going to be true. Okay. Especially in circumstances like this. Okay. John says, does the translation of Isaiah 40:22, globe rather than circle, in one of the Douay Reams prevent a Catholic from believing in flat earth? This also brings to mind your comment on translations. Let me read that again. Does the translation of Isaiah 40:22 in one of the doings prevent a Catholic from believing in a flat earth? Um, well, I would say yes and no. Okay, I have to say yes and no because the Douay Reams is the only translation that I know of that translated um, what's the Hebrew? I forget the Hebrew word. It's a very small word. As globe in Isaiah 40:22. Everybody else, not everybody, but a lot more, translated as circle. Okay. Now, one reason I think, I mean, I'm not going to fault the Douay Reams for translating a globe because that's the intent of the verse. Technically speaking, though, the Hebrew word does not mean globe. The Hebrews didn't even have a word for globe. They had no word for sphere. And look, this is an 8,000 word vocabulary. So, I mean, they even called their uncle your father's brother. Okay. So they didn't have a word for everything. That's why you'll find in a lot of your reading of the Old Testament, you'll see these long sentences describing what we could say in one word. Not often, but enough that we know that their vocabulary was limited. So the the correct word though is circle. But a circle can be, depending on the context, can be understood as being a globe, a sphere, uh, um, or and something along those lines. Okay, so it's not the no part of it is that it's not just Isaiah 40:22 that's going to determine whether the earth is flat or not. Okay. The way Isaiah 42 is set up is God is looking from high above. If you look at the context, that's what it says. And he sees men on the earth as grasshoppers. Okay. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that the view God has is going to be high enough. Now, this is all taking into account that we understand God with human eyes, so to speak, looking at the earth. Okay. Um, and in that context, we have God seeing the men as grasshoppers. And how big is a grasshopper? Okay. Grasshopper, let me see. Some parts of the world, grasshoppers are pretty big. But let's say a grasshopper is this size. Okay. Now, a man, of course, is the size I am, which is too big at the moment, actually. Um, and I'm like 16,000 times bigger than this thing. So let's say I'm 16,000 times bigger than a grasshopper. So if you had to calculate using math how high God had to be in order to see a man as a grasshopper, you can pretty much, it goes into the millions, but you can figure it out mathematically. Okay. So if you're that high and you're looking down on the earth, what are you going to see? You're not going to see a sphere. Okay. You're going to see a circle because if you're that far away, it's just like the sun looks like a circle to us, although it's a sphere, because we can't see the third dimension of the sun being that far away from the sun. Same with the moon. We see basically two dimensions of the moon. We can't see the third dimension because we're too far away. Okay. So when God is looking down on the earth, he sees a circle. All right. So it would be wrong, technically speaking, to put the word globe in there. And I make that point in my commentary about this in the book Flat Earth, Flat Wrong. That it's a little enthusiastic to say that the Hebrew word there means globe. Now, on the other hand, we know that in the final analysis, it has to be a globe because we don't live on a circle. Okay, so that's why it's hard. That's why I say yes and no, because it's hard to say that the DER got it wrong in the final analysis of it. In the technical analysis, you could say, yeah, they're a little presumptuous in putting the word globe there, especially since Hebrew didn't have a word for globe. Okay. Um, it's better to see it as a circle because that's what someone would see that high above the earth. You would see a circle just like we see the moon as a circle. Okay. So I hope that helps you. Is it bad for kids to celebrate and dress up for Halloween? Uh, Depending on what you dress up as. Okay. I mean, if you're going to promote evil and go out as witches and, with broomsticks and, uh, you know, Dracula and all that stuff, yeah. Okay. That's bad because we're promoting the evil side of the world, which is the last thing we want to do. The world has commandeered Halloween. It used to be Hallowed Eve for all the dead saints, you know. Now it's Halloween the manifestation of how evil you can look, or how disoriented you can look. And we try to, say it's all so innocent because it's just kids going out for candy and trying to scare the wits out of you so that you give them candy instead of getting a trick. Well, yeah, that has its limitations, though. So, in my judgment, yeah, I don't take my kids out for Halloween unless, the kid wants to dress as an angel or, um, I remember one time I took my kid out. This is like 20 years ago or more. My kid dressed up as an angel and carried a sword. And, we see that all the time in Catholic artistry, angels like St. Michael carrying the sword and beating the dragon. And I remember the first house we went to, the guy said, "Look at that. It's an angel with a sword. You ever see anything like that?" Yeah, I felt like having a conversation with him, but we had to move on. So, at any rate, yeah, I do not encourage that. Sorry, I'm an old fuddy duddy. The only thing I would recommend is go out with something that's good if you want to take part in it and get some, free candy. All right. Um, why Catholic sainthood? If it's impossible not to sin after a genuine conversion, then no one should be praying to them for intervention. The blood of Christ covers all sins, isn't an answer. So, are you asking a question, um, Richard? All right, Richard. The way we see it is this: um, um, being completely free of sin does not a saint define. Okay, a saint can be one who commits venial sins. Very rarely, but he will commit venial sins every once in a while. It doesn't matter how many. You commit one, okay, so you're not sinless, are you? No matter how holy you are. You commit one venial sin, you're not sinless. The only one that we know that didn't do that was Jesus Christ and the Blessed Virgin. Okay, and that's because the Blessed Virgin has special dispensation from God. She was made that way. Okay, so now with saints, okay, so we've already answered the question about the sin issue. As far as praying to them, here's the way we look at it. If a saint who is declared a saint by the church and is truly a saint, they will be in heaven. So we can pray to those in heaven because we know they've made it. They have been accepted into heaven by God because of their holiness, and because of that holiness, they are now enjoying the fruits of heaven with everybody else that's there, and they are free of sin totally. And now all they want to do is help us. And how do they help us? Well, we ask for their intercession because they have done so well in life. God listens to people that have done the best in life more than he will someone who has not done the best that he could do. And that's because God favors them. Okay. And we see this all throughout the Old and New Testaments. Nothing new. Okay. It's not that God's being unfair. No, God actually did like Moses better than Aaron. Okay. So, and that's because Moses was very holy. As a matter of fact, Moses was so holy that when the Israelites sinned by creating the golden calf, guess who was there interceding for them? It was Moses, who stood right in front of God's face, humbly, but he stood there, probably shaking in his boots. But he said, "Dear Lord, please don't destroy the Israelites," and gave him two good logical arguments. How's that for a prayer? And God said, "Okay, I won't destroy them." Okay. Now, can you imagine if Aaron stood before God and try to say, "Hey, God, come on, man, you were gone a long time. You gotta expect these things to happen. You're being a little too judgmental." You know what God would have done to him? Yeah, and this is the guy Aaron who gave the excuse to Moses. Moses says, "How did this happen?" And Moses says, "I don't know. We just threw the gold out, and this calf jumped out." So you can imagine what God would do to him. He wouldn't listen to him, of course, and so that intercession wouldn't work. Okay, so God does favor one over the other as far as their holiness is concerned and what He's going to listen to. Okay, that's what intercession is all about. Hey, if I didn't get anything more from a saint than I would if I prayed myself, why pray to the saint? It wouldn't make any sense. So there is more in the communion of saints, the treasure of merit, as the church calls it, that's been stored up for people just like me and you to use at our discretion. Okay? So it's there waiting for us. One thing you can't say about God is He's not stingy with His grace. Okay? If you ask Him for it and ask in the right way, you're going to get it. Okay? He's not stingy with His grace. That is for sure. And we have all the help we need. And what help do we? We need help to get to heaven, just like the saints are. Okay? So, what better people to ask than them who've already made it? Because they have sympathy on us. They know how hard it is. It's not easy. And so we ask them, they're gonna be prompted to ask God, intercede for us, to have mercy on us. Okay. I mean, it's a great system. Absolutely. All right. Oh, what do you think of paintings of the nursing Madonna? I think most of them are beautiful, but I'm sure your question is not regarding the beauty, but of the form, a nursing Madonna. Well, I've gone through 11 children, and I see the nursing Madonna all the time in my house. Her name is Maureen, which means Little Mary, and um, he never, moved me one way or the other. Okay, so and I think there are cases when your mind has to be educated before it looks at a piece of art. Now, if you were a little child and you saw the nursing Madonna, what would you do? Well, you point your finger, "Oh, look at that, I see mommy's breast," and all that. Yeah, that's what because you're uneducated. You're a child, okay? But as you grow in maturity, your mind is now reformed to understand reality in a different way. And so you're going to look at that painting and you're going to see um, a display of humanity that's in its most irreducible form, a mother feeding her child. I mean, you can't go much lower than that. I mean, not lower. I mean, that's it. That's what keeps the world going. Okay. If it wasn't for that, none of us would be here. So your mind understands all these things. And so it sees it as something spectacular when you see it, you see, because you've now been educated beyond the childhood level to the adult level. And most good art like that is only appreciated from the adult level. Okay. Now we do have some adults that never grew up. Okay. And they'll turn something like that into pornography. And we even have some famous artists do that. The first one to do that, as we saw the other night, was Jean Fouquet, who uncovered the breast of the Madonna for the first time in history. Okay. So, yeah, there are some men that don't mature and they stay evil. They stay wicked and never reform their ways. And so they make it into pornography. Okay. But it doesn't mean that it's going to detract from anything that we see as beautiful in a nursing Madonna, especially if it's done properly. Okay. So, all right. I am going to cut it off tonight, folks. So I'm starting to feel it. Anyway, next week I will be here, and yeah, I forgot to turn my captions on. There we go. Okay, next week, as I said, we'll be here, and we'll have a staged debate with Eric Dubay on the flat Earth issue. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Um, and then Michael Jones will be here again on the 26th of October to discuss the latter half of his book, Dangers of Beauty. So you won't want to miss that. And before I leave tonight, please go visit robertsongenis.org. We got some new articles up there. We've got 5 new articles up there for your reading pleasure, all free of charge, as they always are. But if you would, please consider giving me a donation. I can surely use it. And consider also becoming a monthly donor if you would. So we're not asking for much, 5, 10, 15, $20 a month. I'm sure you can take off one visit to McDonald's per month and give it to me. So I'm going to make you feel guilty tonight. And or Wendy's or Burger King or whatever, you slip into every once in a while. By the way, Wendy's has a new burger with pretzel buns. Delicious. Yeah, I've been eating too many of those, so I gotta get off that wagon train. Anyway, but if you would visit and look at our books and DVDs and all that, I'm sure you'll find something you like. So, and if you have a question for next week, I don't think we'll be taking questions by mail, but it's best to get ahead of the line. If you have questions, send them to me by email, sungenis@aol.com, and I'll be glad to answer them when we do questions again. All right, so this is Robert Sungenis signing off. Nice to have you with us tonight. God be with you all. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I have made your walk with God one step closer tonight. God be with you all.